I opened my eyes to an alien healer. Her first words shattered me. "You gripped my hand." Captain Derek Carter had always prided himself on his resilience. As a seasoned explorer in the vast reaches of space, he had faced dangers countless times before. Yet nothing had prepared him for this. A routine mission to map an uncharted planetary system had turned into a nightmare in the blink of an eye. The spacecraft systems failed without warning, and the crash was catastrophic. Derek's body had been torn apart by the violent impact, and he lost consciousness before he could even comprehend what was happening. When he awoke, he was no longer in the comfort of his ship, but lying on the ground of an alien world, his body mangled and aching. The sky above was an unfamiliar shade of deep violet, and the air smelled strange, heavy but not unpleasant. His limbs felt numb, his mind clouded with confusion and pain. He struggled to move, but the pain surged through him, and his vision blurred as he tried to focus. The last thing he remembered was the terrifying moment when his ship plummeted toward the planet's surface. Just as Derek's vision began to fade again, a soft voice interrupted the darkness. It was gentle, almost melodic, but with an undertone of authority that instantly caught his attention. "Stay with me," the voice said, calm yet commanding. Derek blinked his eyes, trying to force himself to focus. His vision cleared, and for the first time he saw her, an alien woman. Her features were unlike anything he had ever seen before. Her skin shimmered with a soft, bluish-purple hue, as though it was bathed in the glow of the planet's strange light. Her eyes were large and dark, with an intense yet compassionate gaze. She had hair the color of pale gold, flowing in soft waves that seemed to shimmer with an ethereal glow. Her presence was both calming and overpowering, as if she carried the weight of the entire world in her hands. Derek tried to speak, but his throat was dry, and his voice came out in a barely audible rasp. "Who are you?" The woman smiled faintly, her expression a mixture of concern and warmth. "I am Lura, healer of my people. You were hurt, but I am here to help." Derek's mind was too foggy to process what she said, and his vision began to blur again. But before he could slip back into unconsciousness, he felt something cool and soothing touch his hand. Lura's fingers gently encased his own, and for the briefest moment, he felt an inexplicable surge of energy course through his body. It wasn't just physical. It was as though her touch was reaching into his very soul, pulling him from the edge of death and back into the realm of the living. Her words broke through the haze. "You gripped my hand," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a bond, a connection." Derek tried to respond, but the words caught in his throat. The sensation of her hand in his felt different, more profound than just the act of holding someone's hand. It was as though the simple gesture had connected them in a way that went beyond mere physical touch. But what did she mean by bond? And why was he feeling this way? His body was still broken, but something within him was stirring. He could feel the change, a shift in the air around him, a presence that was both foreign and strangely comforting. The pain in his body was numbed by the soothing touch of Lura, but more than that, he felt alive. A sense of vitality was returning to him, slowly but steadily, and the weight of the world on his shoulders was starting to lift. It was as though he had been given a second chance at life, and the one responsible for it was this alien healer before him. Derek tried to sit up, but his body refused to cooperate. The pain was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but it was dulled. He looked up at Lura again, his mind racing as he tried to make sense of everything. "Am I going to be okay?" he asked, his voice still raspy but more coherent than before. Lura's eyes softened. "You will heal, but you are not like the others I have healed. This bond we share, it is unique. It was not part of the healing process. It is something more. I do not fully understand it, but I can feel it as clearly as you can. You will feel it too." Derek's mind raced with questions. What was she talking about? How could he feel something that he hadn't even begun to understand? And what did she mean by the bond between them? He had never heard of anything like it, not in any of the stories or books he had read about alien species and their cultures. But there was no denying the intensity of the connection he felt to her. It was as though, for the first time in his life, he wasn't alone. Lura's fingers gently withdrew from his hand, and the sudden loss of contact sent a shockwave of emptiness through Derek. His body ached with the absence of her presence, and he couldn't help but feel a pang of longing. But then, as if sensing his distress, she placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. "I must continue your healing," she said softly. but we must move quickly. The effects of your injuries are not yet fully gone. Derek nodded, his mind still in a fog. He couldn't remember the last time he had felt so vulnerable, so completely at the mercy of someone else. But there was something about Lura that made him trust her, something he couldn't explain. Maybe it was the gentleness in her eyes or the calm certainty in her voice. Whatever it was, he couldn't deny it. As Lura worked to heal him, Derek found himself drifting in and out of consciousness. But in those brief moments of wakefulness, he could feel her presence close by, like a protective force guarding him from the darkness. The bond she spoke of was growing stronger, and Derek couldn't help but feel it too. It wasn't just her touch, it was something deeper, something more profound. Every time their hands touched, every time their eyes met, Derek could feel the connection growing, like invisible threads weaving between them. He couldn't explain it, but it was as if their very souls were tied together. And though he was still weak, still injured, he felt a sense of peace he had never known before. But there was also a nagging sense of confusion. Lura's first words to him, "You gripped my hand," kept echoing in his mind. What did they mean? Why did it feel like they were more than just words? And what was the true nature of the bond between them? Derek's mind drifted again, and as he fell back into unconsciousness, he couldn't help but wonder what the future held. He was alive, but his journey was far from over. And the strange bond he shared with Lura, this alien healer, was just beginning to unfold. Derek's mind was a whirlpool of confusion and wonder as he lay on the ground, recovering under Lura's careful care. Each time he woke, she was there, tending to his injuries with a gentle touch that seemed to ease more than just the pain in his body. There was something healing about her presence, something that felt ancient and comforting. She had been kind to him, soothing his fears when he awoke, speaking softly to him in a language that was at once alien and familiar. Her words were foreign, but there was a warmth in her voice that made him feel safe. As the days passed, Derek felt the strength slowly returning to his body. The pain that had once overwhelmed him had lessened, and the numbness that had taken over his limbs was beginning to fade. His wounds, which had seemed impossible to heal, were now closing, and his body was no longer fighting against the damage. It was as if Lura's healing touch was restoring him, not just physically, but in ways he couldn't fully comprehend. It was almost as if she was helping him regain a part of himself that had been lost during the crash. Derek had spent his whole life in space, charting unknown worlds and exploring the vastness of the universe. He had never expected to find himself in a situation like this. Alone on an alien planet, with no idea how to survive, relying entirely on the help of an alien healer whose methods were beyond his understanding. There was no way for him to know what would happen next, but there was one thing he knew for sure. He was alive, and it was thanks to Lura. She continued to care for him, providing nourishment, rest, and healing. There were moments when he felt the weight of their silence, when words weren't needed, and the bond between them spoke louder than anything they could say. Every touch, every look shared between them seemed to deepen the connection. But it wasn't just physical. There was something emotional there too, something that Derek couldn't explain. Derek had never been the type of man to rely on anyone. He was independent, a loner by nature, shaped by years of space exploration and the isolation that came with it. But here, on this alien planet, he had found himself in a position he wasn't familiar with. He needed help. He needed her. And the strange part was he didn't mind. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to be in control, to push away the vulnerability that had always been his shield. With Lura, he could simply let go. It was during one of these moments, when Derek was resting beneath the shade of a massive, strange tree, that Lura finally spoke of something that had been lingering in his mind. She sat beside him, her presence calm and steady as always. The leaves of the tree above them swayed in a gentle breeze, casting soft shadows on the ground. The alien planet was peaceful, but there was an underlying tension in the air, an uncertainty that Derek couldn't shake. "You've been recovering well," Lura said softly, her eyes never leaving him, "but there is something important we must discuss." Derek looked up at her, his curiosity piqued. He could feel the gravity of her words before they even left her mouth. "What is it?" Lura took a deep breath, her expression serious but kind. "The bond between us, it is more than just a healing connection. It is something unique. You have felt it, haven't you? The way your strength has returned, the way your senses have sharpened. This is the result of what we have shared." Derek felt his pulse quicken. He had sensed it, of course, the way his body seemed to be healing faster than it should have. But there was more to it. He had felt it deep within himself, like a current running through him, pulling him towards something. It was undeniable, the way their connection had affected him in ways he couldn't explain. "What do you mean by unique?" Laura looked away, her eyes momentarily distant. She seemed to be gathering her thoughts, trying to find the right words. "My people have the ability to heal, yes, but the process of healing is not always the same. When I healed you, I unknowingly activated a connection between us, a bond that goes beyond physical healing. It is emotional, spiritual, and it has altered you." Derek's mind raced. "Altered me? How?" Laura turned her gaze back to him, her expression soft but filled with an unspoken urgency. "You have been given powers, your senses are heightened. Your strength is greater than it was before. The bond between us has infused your body with energy, energy that was never meant for you. You are not like other humans anymore. You are changed." Derek's heart pounded in his chest. He hadn't imagined it then. He had felt different, but hearing her say it made it real. He was no longer just the human explorer he had once been. Something had happened to him, something that went beyond any explanation he had. "But why?" Derek asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Why did this happen?" Laura hesitated before answering. "I do not fully understand it. It was never meant to happen this way. But the bond we share, it is stronger than I anticipated. You are not the first to have been healed by my kind, but you are the first to experience this connection." Derek looked at her, trying to make sense of it all. "So, what does it mean for me? What happens now?" Laura looked deeply into his eyes, and Derek could see the conflict there. She wanted to tell him something more, something that would help him understand, but she was holding back. Finally, she spoke again, her voice softer this time, tinged with sadness. "I must warn you, the bond we share is not without its consequences. The power you now possess comes at a cost. As you continue to grow stronger, so too will the intensity of the connection between us, and that can be dangerous." Derek felt a shiver run down his spine. Dangerous. He had never wanted anything more than to get back to his mission, to return to the stars. But now everything had changed. His future, his path, none of it seemed certain anymore. "I'm not afraid of danger," Derek said, his voice steady, though his mind was in turmoil. "I've faced worse, but I need to understand. What does this mean for me, for us?" Laura remained silent for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. "It means that you are not alone anymore, but it also means that I cannot leave you. Our bond is permanent. We are connected in ways you cannot yet comprehend, and you will feel its effects for the rest of your life." Derek was struck by the finality of her words. She was right. He could no longer deny what was happening to him. The bond they shared was more than just a healing process. It was a tether, a connection that could not be undone, but there was more to it. He could sense it in her eyes, in the way she held herself. She, too, was affected by this bond. It wasn't just him who was changed by it. They were both in this together. Derek took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "So, what now? What do we do with all of this?" Laura's eyes softened as she looked at him. "We find a way to live with it. We learn to control it, to understand it. But most importantly, we need to be careful. The more we learn, the more we will uncover about the bond and its effects on both of us." Derek nodded slowly, the weight of her words sinking in. This was only the beginning. The bond they shared had changed everything, and now they had to figure out how to navigate this new reality together. Derek's mind was still reeling from the revelation of the bond between him and Laura. It wasn't just a simple healing touch, as he had first assumed. It was something deeper, something that went beyond the physical. He had felt it ever since he woke up, a subtle, constant pull between them. But now, hearing the truth, he realized just how much his life had changed in the span of just a few days. As the days passed, Derek's body continued to heal, but with every passing hour, his thoughts grew heavier. The strange powers he had begun to experience were undeniable. His senses were sharper than ever before. He could hear the faint rustling of the leaves from miles away, feel the warmth of the sun on his skin even when it wasn't directly shining on him. His strength had increased too. Simple tasks, like lifting himself off the ground or standing for long periods, which had once felt impossible, were now effortless. But the most unsettling part was the connection he shared with Laura. Every time she entered the room, he felt a shift in the air, a subtle magnetic pull that seemed to guide his every thought. Laura had been kind, but she was distant at times, as though she were carrying a weight heavier than the world itself. She rarely spoke of the bond, but Derek could see it in her eyes when she looked at him. There was a deep understanding there, an unspoken knowledge that neither of them could escape. They were connected, for better or worse, and neither knew what it meant for the future. One evening, as the two sat together by the edge of the strange, glowing river that ran through the alien landscape, Derek couldn't keep the questions inside anymore. The silence between them was comfortable, but the weight of the unknown loomed large. He needed answers. "Laura," he began, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty, "you said this bond is permanent, but what does that really mean? What happens when we can't control it anymore?" Laura didn't look at him right away. She stared at the water, watching the strange bioluminescent creatures that swam below its surface. After a long pause, she finally turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "It means that you and I will be bound in ways that neither of us fully understands," she said softly. "As you've already experienced, this connection gives you abilities, strength, heightened senses, things you never had before. But the bond also comes with risks. The more powerful the connection becomes, the harder it will be to control. And not just for you, but for me too." Derek frowned, trying to grasp the magnitude of what she was saying. "So what happens if it becomes uncontrollable? What if we can't stop it?" Laura's gaze softened, and for the first time he saw the vulnerability in her eyes. "I do not know. No one has ever experienced this before. My people. We've always been careful to keep our healing abilities separate from emotional bonds. It was never meant to go this far." Derek felt a shiver run through him. The uncertainty in her voice unnerved him. It wasn't the calm, confident healer he had grown used to. Laura was afraid, and that made him even more uneasy. "I'm not afraid of the powers themselves," Derek said after a long pause. "It's the unknown that scares me. This connection between us. It's not just physical, is it? There's something else there, something deeper. It's not just about me." Laura closed her eyes for a moment, as though collecting her thoughts. When she opened them again, Derek saw something in her eyes that he hadn't noticed before, a sadness. A deep, quiet sadness that spoke of something beyond their present situation, something from her past. "You're right," she said, her voice low. "This connection is more than just physical. It's emotional, spiritual. It ties us together in ways that go beyond the limits of your body, and the deeper we go, the harder it will be to separate." "Separate?" Derek echoed, his stomach tightening at the thought. "Are you saying that eventually we won't be able to break the bond?" Laura nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "That's what I fear. The more we try to fight it, the more powerful it becomes. We are linked, Derek, and that link will not fade no matter what happens. Even if you leave this planet, even if you go back to your people, the bond will remain." Derek felt a pang of dread in his chest. He had always been a man of action, a man who was used to making decisions and moving forward. But this was something he couldn't control. And that scared him more than anything. "What if I don't want this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Laura's face softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder, the touch gentle but firm. "I didn't want it either, but it happened. We can't change that now." Derek swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words sink in. He wasn't sure what to do. The life he had known, his mission, his future, seemed so far away now. This alien planet, this bond with Laura, was all-consuming, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized he couldn't go back to his old life. Not with what had happened to him. Not with what was happening to him now. The more time he spent with Laura, the more he felt the pull between them. She was more than just a healer to him now. She was something else. He couldn't deny it anymore. She was important not just to his survival, but to his very existence. And the bond they shared was something that neither of them could walk away from. Derek stood up, pacing by the riverbank, trying to clear his thoughts. His mind raced with the implications of what Laura had said. There was so much uncertainty ahead of him. The future seemed clouded, full of questions he didn't have answers to, but one thing was clear: he had changed. He couldn't go back to the man he was before. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't know if I can handle this bond." Laura watched him silently, understanding in her eyes. "None of us are ready for what comes next, but we must face it together. The bond between us is a part of who we are now, Derek, and we must learn to live with it." Derek stopped, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked at Laura, seeing her for who she truly was, not just the healer, but a woman who was carrying the weight of this connection as much as he was. Her eyes held the same uncertainty, the same fear of what lay ahead. "I'm not alone in this," Derek said, more to himself than to her. "We're in this together." Lyra nodded, her expression steady but soft. "Yes, together." The weight of those words hung in the air between them, heavy and unspoken, together. It was both comforting and terrifying, and Derek wasn't sure which feeling was stronger. He had never felt more alive, and yet he had never felt more lost. As they stood by the glowing river, the sounds of the alien world surrounding them, Derek realized that this was his new reality. There was no going back to the life he had known. The bond with Lyra was something that would shape the rest of his existence, and whether he was ready for it or not, he had no choice but to face it. And so, as the stars began to twinkle above them in the alien sky, Derek made a decision. He would face whatever came next, not as a man alone, but as someone bound to another, someone who had to learn to trust not only Lyra but the strange new path that lay before him. Whatever happened, they would face it together. And that, he realized, was the only certainty he had left. The days that followed were filled with a strange sense of anticipation, as if the very air around them was charged with an unseen force. Derek had come to accept the bond he shared with Lyra, but that acceptance didn't mean he understood it. He still had questions, doubts that swirled in his mind like an endless storm. But there was one thing he knew for sure now: he couldn't leave. Not anymore. Not without knowing what would happen to him, to them. Lyra had been his constant companion since the moment he awoke on this alien planet. She was the reason he was still alive, the reason he was able to stand and walk, the reason his body had begun to heal so quickly. But it wasn't just the healing. The more time he spent with her, the more he felt the unexplainable pull between them, a pull that was becoming stronger by the day. They spent hours talking, or rather, Derek did most of the talking while Lyra listened. There was something soothing about her presence. Her quiet demeanor, the way she always seemed to know exactly what he needed, gave him a sense of comfort he had never known. Yet, despite the peace she brought, Derek could sense the tension in her. She was holding something back, something important that she wasn't telling him. One evening, as they sat around a small fire they had built, the only source of light in the darkening world, Derek couldn't hold his curiosity any longer. The bond they shared was starting to feel like a secret, one that both of them were unwilling to share fully with the other. "Lyra," Derek began, his voice steady but filled with the weight of his thoughts, "you've been quiet lately. Something's bothering you, and I can feel it." Lyra didn't look at him at first, her gaze fixed on the flickering flames. The fire cast shadows on her face, making her features seem even more distant, as though she were lost in thought. Finally, after a long silence, she turned her gaze to him. Her eyes were soft, but there was an undeniable sadness there. "You're right," she said quietly. "There is something I've been keeping from you, something I've feared telling you." Derek leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "What is it? You can tell me, Lyra. You don't have to keep secrets from me." Lyra took a deep breath, her hands folding together in her lap. "It's about the bond between us," she began. "What you're experiencing now, the strength, the heightened senses, the power, this is only the beginning. But there's a darker side to it, Derek, a side that neither of us can escape." Derek felt a chill run through him. He had suspected that there was more to the bond than just physical changes, but hearing her say it out loud made the reality hit him hard. "The power you have now," Lyra continued, "it is not something that can be controlled easily. The bond between us has begun to merge our essences, Derek. It's not just a link between our minds or bodies, it's a merging of our spirits. And as time goes on, this merging will become stronger." Derek's mind reeled at the implications of her words. "What happens when the bond gets stronger?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra's gaze hardened, and for the first time, Derek saw fear in her eyes. "When the bond reaches its peak, you will no longer be able to function as you did before. You won't be able to separate from me, not mentally, not emotionally. And the worst part is, the more we are connected, the more the bond will begin to affect the world around us." Derek's heart skipped a beat. He had always prided himself on being in control of his life, his body, his mission. But now he was trapped in a connection he didn't fully understand, and that terrified him. "What do you mean?" he asked. "How could this bond affect the world around us?" Lyra lowered her gaze as if the weight of her next words was too much to bear. "When two beings are so closely connected, their energy begins to ripple outwards. At first, it's small, harmless. But over time, the energy grows. It affects everything. The environment. The people nearby. The animals, the plants. It's like a wave that ripples through everything, changing it. Derek was silent for a moment, trying to digest what she had just said. He had seen the changes in himself, but he had never imagined that the consequences of their bond could extend beyond just the two of them. "So, you're saying that our connection could destroy everything around us?" he asked, the fear rising in his chest. Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes filled with regret. "That's why I've been hesitant to tell you. I didn't want you to feel burdened by it, but now it's too late. The bond is already growing stronger. We're running out of time." Derek stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth as he tried to make sense of everything. His mind was a blur, but one thought stood out above all others. He couldn't let this happen. He couldn't let their bond destroy everything. "We have to stop it," he said, turning to face Lyra. "There has to be a way to break it. We have to find a way to reverse whatever's happening." Lyra's eyes softened with sorrow. "I wish it were that simple, Derek, but this is not something that can be undone. The more we try to separate, the stronger the bond will become. It's a force that neither of us can control." Derek's chest tightened as he processed her words. The thought of being bound to this planet, bound to Lyra forever, was almost too much to bear. But he couldn't just accept that. He couldn't give up. He was a man of action, a man who had always fought for what he believed in, and now he had to fight for his freedom. "Then what do we do?" he demanded. "Do we just give up and let this bond consume us? Let it destroy everything we care about?" Lyra stood, her expression serious. "No, we don't give up, but we have to understand that this bond is not something we can defeat by force. We must learn to live with it, learn to control it before it controls us." Derek didn't like the sound of that. The idea of living with this bond, of accepting it as part of him, was something he wasn't ready for. But as he looked at Lyra, he saw the same fear in her eyes. She didn't want this any more than he did. "Then what's the plan?" Derek asked, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "How do we control it?" Lyra took a deep breath, her gaze never leaving his. "We start by understanding the bond. We study it, learn what it is, how it works. We find a way to harness its power, to make it our ally rather than our enemy. But it will take time, patience, and trust, and we'll have to work together." Derek nodded slowly, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. He had never felt so conflicted in his life. Part of him wanted to run, to escape from this planet, and from the bond he shared with Lyra. But another part of him knew that running wouldn't solve anything. The bond was part of him now, part of who he was, and no matter how much he resisted, it wasn't something he could escape. The fire crackled in the silence between them, the flickering flames casting long shadows on the ground. Derek felt the tension in the air, the weight of their shared responsibility. This was their reality now. The bond between them wasn't something they could wish away, no matter how hard they tried. "We'll do it," Derek said finally, his voice firm. "We'll figure this out together." Lyra's eyes softened with gratitude. "Thank you, Derek. I know this isn't easy, but you are not alone in this. We are in this together." And for the first time, Derek believed her. Despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, he knew that they would face whatever came next as one. Together. The night that followed their conversation was silent but heavy. The air felt thick, and the weight of their words hung between Derek and Lyra. Neither of them spoke much after their agreement to face the bond together. Derek lay awake for hours, staring at the alien stars above them. His mind was a whirl of thoughts, swirling with the reality of what they had just accepted. He had never been the type to back down from a challenge. But this was different. It wasn't just about strength or courage. This was about a connection, something he didn't fully understand, something that had changed him. It was something he couldn't escape, no matter how far he tried to run. And deep down, Derek knew he didn't want to. There was something in him, something deep and raw, that couldn't deny the pull he felt toward Lyra. The next morning, the sun rose with a faint purple glow, casting strange shadows across the alien landscape. Derek and Lyra had already made a plan. They would seek the knowledge of Lyra's people, the ones who had never fully embraced the healing bond. Lyra had told him that there were ancient texts, scrolls, and even oral histories that might contain the answers they were looking for. Knowledge was the key, and they both agreed that it was time to learn what they were truly dealing with. Derek couldn't help but feel an odd sense of excitement mixed with fear as they journeyed to the heart of Lyra's village. The path was long, winding through dense alien forests where strange creatures watched from the shadows. The trees towered over them, their trunks twisting into the sky in ways that seemed impossible. It was a world unlike any Derek had ever known, and as much as he wanted to understand it, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking in a dream. When they finally arrived, Derek was struck by the beauty of the place. The village was built into the landscape, with homes carved out of stone and wood nestled beneath the enormous trees. There was a peaceful quiet to the place, an almost eerie calm that made Derek feel small in comparison to the vastness of the world around him. The inhabitants of the village were unlike anything he had seen before. Tall with the same bluish-purple skin as Lura, they moved with an effortless grace, their expressions serene, almost distant. Lura led him to a small building at the center of the village where the elders gathered. The building was unlike anything Derek had seen before. It was carved from stone, the walls smooth and polished, the entrance framed by intricate designs that seemed to pulse with life. Inside, the air was cool, and the soft hum of energy filled the space. The elders sat in a circle, their eyes closed in deep concentration. When they opened their eyes to see Lura and Derek, their gaze was calculating, as if they were studying them both. They looked at Derek with a mixture of curiosity and caution, and for the first time since arriving on the planet, Derek felt like an outsider. Lura stepped forward and spoke to the elders in their native language, her voice calm but filled with a sense of urgency. Derek couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear enough. She was asking for their help. After a long silence, one of the elders, an older woman with silver hair, spoke. Her voice was soft but firm, and she seemed to be addressing both Lura and Derek. "The bond you share is rare," she said, her eyes focusing on Derek. "It is not something we have ever seen before. You are the first to experience it in this way, and it is not without consequence. The energy you have created together is unlike anything we have encountered." Derek listened closely, his heart beating faster as the woman spoke. "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice tinged with both fear and curiosity. The elder turned her gaze to him, her eyes sharp and piercing. "It means that the bond you share will affect more than just you. The energy you create is powerful, Derek, and it will grow. If it continues unchecked, it will alter not only your lives but the very fabric of this world. The longer you are connected, the stronger the energy becomes, and soon it will be impossible to separate." Derek felt a cold shiver run down his spine. "So what do we do?" he asked. "How do we stop it?" The elder's expression softened, though there was a sadness in her eyes. "There is no stopping it, not entirely, but there are ways to control it to keep it from consuming you both. The key is understanding the nature of the bond. You must learn to master it, or it will master you." Lura nodded as if she had expected this answer. She turned to Derek, her eyes filled with determination. "We will learn," she said simply. "We will control it together." But as they left the building and made their way back into the village, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. He could feel the bond between them growing stronger with each passing hour. It wasn't just a pull anymore. It was a constant presence in his mind, a whisper in the back of his thoughts. He could hear Lura's voice even when she wasn't speaking. He could feel her emotions as if they were his own. It was as if their souls were intertwined, and the more they tried to fight it, the stronger it became. They spent the next several days learning from the elders. Lura translated their teachings for Derek, explaining the ancient rituals and methods that the villagers used to control the energy of their bonds. But no matter how much they learned, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something. There was a piece of the puzzle that just didn't fit. One evening, as they sat by the same glowing river where they had spoken before, Derek finally voiced the question that had been gnawing at him. "Lura," he said quietly, "do you ever wonder if we're making a mistake? What if this bond, it's not meant to be? What if we can't control it? What if we destroy everything we care about?" Lura's gaze softened as she looked at him. "I wonder that too," she admitted, "but we cannot live in fear of what might happen. We must face it head-on. The bond between us is not a curse, Derek. It is a part of who we are now. We cannot change it, but we can learn to live with it." Derek stared at the river, the soft hum of the energy in the water echoing in the silence between them. He knew she was right. The bond was a part of him now, a part of who he had become, and there was no turning back. "Together, then," he said, his voice firm with resolve. "We face whatever comes next together." Lura nodded, her eyes meeting his with a quiet strength. together. As they sat in the silence of the alien world, Derek realized that they had no choice but to face whatever lay ahead. They couldn't change the bond, but they could control it, and in the end, that would be enough. Because they were in this together, and together they would find a way to survive.